Alright, so I would say I lucked out because I got an offer to be able to see this safely, but I'm not entirely sure that I would call it luck because it is the Croods 2, A New Age, which for some reason they didn't put on the streaming services right away, despite the success of like Trolls 2. But I don't know. There's a lot of things about this movie that are really like questionable. There's the whole thing where it was like canceled at one point a few years ago, and then like a year later it was put back on. But it's like it's almost like they thought we were desperate for a sequel to the Croods, which is the first one that came out in 2013. I remember my memory's vague of it. I don't think I've even seen it since it came out, but I do remember liking it. I'm pretty sure. But you would think with all this time and the desperation to put a sequel out that they would have come up with something like really interesting to do with it. I know the concept only gives you so many options, but there was still some nice creativity in the first one, like with the creature designs and like how they're kind of two animals combined and stuff like that, and the stuff they did with the time frame in which it's set, but and the humor I remember working really well. So I remember it being really funny, but um, I I don't know that I can think of anything that they brought to this one that really changes it or makes it any better, except maybe the inclusion of Peter Dinklage in the voice cast, but that's probably about it. Um, so I say the first movie is vague to me, but luckily there is a very helpful recap that shows us pretty much the events of the whole first movie leading up to the events of now, and now things are progressing to where the Ryan Reynolds character Guy and Emma Stone's character Eep are their relationship is like really really in full force now, and they're like super duper in love. There's montages going on to David Cassidy and stuff like that, and this actually kind of gives it a bit of a promising start. Like there's a lot of really great energy, the animation's well done, the montages are humorously put together. There's a really clever shot where they seem to be like kissing with a candle lit in the middle of them, but then the wick of the candle is actually Cage, like way in the distance on fire. So a lot of stuff like that, and then the idea that Guy was the one that was guiding them along and had all the interesting ideas, and now falling in love has pretty much made him useless in the eyes of Cage's character. So really, the glory of watching this obviously is Cage, and even in animated form, Cage's caginess can still find its way out. Like it's to the point where there were some cases where his character, even like the faces he would make, and some of the ways he said his lines, where it was like this Cage could have been in live action and the entire rest of the movie animated around him, and it probably would have been a very similar vibe. And it's come to think of it, that's actually should be the way most Cage movies go, like to really contain exactly what he's capable of. To the point that he even has a line at some point when he says, "Never apologize for an effective kill circle." And it's like just these things here where it's like you can actually see the Cage movie within this very sort of mainstream animated family movie, and it's and that's probably the reason that I mean we talked about like what creative reasons would they have for doing this? What interesting ideas do they have now? I sometimes forget just how much money the first movie made. So that's probably it made like a shitload. So I'm pretty sure it passed like $500 million, but that's what that's what's going on with this one. So the only change here is that there's always obviously always going to be some apocalyptic threat or whatever, but in this case, they find this sort of utopia surrounded by a wall where everything's like blue and colorful and stuff like that. It almost looks like it's underwater, and then we meet Peter Dinklage and Leslie Mann, who are a married couple that apparently knew Guy when he was a child and knew his family and all that. And they also have a daughter named Dawn. And weirdly enough, that's pretty much where the story is. For most of the story is. Where they want to set it, because there's the whole division of they're much more civilized and the Croods are obviously cave people. Which cave people is mentioned later on in the movie, and it's treated as if it's basically a slur. And so that's kind of where they're trying to get the comedy from, but Yeah, and so the plot, of course, is that they are hoping to separate Guy from the cave people and be civilized with them by hooking him up with Dawn and leaving Eve behind. And is that like when you think about all the work they put into making this movie exist, that's apparently what the core idea was. A love triangle thing. So I don't know. And then at that point, the movie basically gets stuck in a loop in the middle, where we basically get one portion of this story and we see how it plays out, and then I swear it felt like the rest of the middle was that plot all over again with the characters in slightly different situations. So that's what that is. And like I said, there is, some nice voice work here from Peter Dinklage particularly. Leslie Mann doesn't get to do as much as him, which sucks because I feel like she's kind of underrated in regards to her comedic talent and the way she can deliver a line, but yeah, it's really hardly interested in that. It doesn't really have any new ideas at all. Every now and then there's some comedic situation that's interesting only in, like, as far as the context goes, like, because it's what it is, but it's within the background with these characters in this kind of movie. Like, there's a point in time where Dawn gets a bee sting terribly on her hand, and it, like, swells up entirely. And it's having some sort of effect on her, so it's like she has to go to the dinner table and act like this isn't affecting her. And it's basically the scene you see in other movies where it's like somebody that's drunk or high is trying to seem like they're not in a setting that's, yeah, an inappropriate setting to be in this state. So that's about where the humor's coming from, is every now and then we get a situation thing, but for the most part it's everything jumping around everywhere, being as chaotic as possible. Like I said, notice I've switched to the word chaotic because the first time, like in the beginning montages, it felt more energetic, which is usually positive, and chaotic maybe not so much. So, but sometimes it's funny, but most of the time it feels like it's just sort of desperate flailing and hoping that they're keeping your attention in some way or another. And that's not to take away from the fact that, yes, we know the target demographic is like children and all that, but there's still smart ways to do that, and this movie very occasionally finds them, but for the most part, not really. So, yeah, and then there's a lot of pointless music cues, which we know is, what these movies do, these animated movies that just want to keep everything moving, but also want it to be like, hey, if you're familiar with this thing, then you're probably liking this because you like that other thing. But it's and those are obviously pretty desperate throughout. Even though I do praise the use of the David Cassidy song before, it's the whole concept eventually wears out its welcome, where they use like popular love songs and stuff like that in various cases, and not always in the case of Guy and Eve scenes. So there's that. But eventually a threat is brought into this because the movie had to go somewhere, had to have some sort of climax where a lot was happening. So it's a bunch of monkeys that are led by what appears to be a giant Rafiki, is is what the threat is, and because Cage ate all of their bananas or something, and that's what Peter Dinklage was using to fend them off. But I will give it credit for one thing, I guess, and that would be that I was kind of expecting this to go in a direction that it didn't. Where when we first met Peter Dinklage and Leslie Mann, and we realized they were from Guy's Past and stuff like that, it was like, why do I feel like they are not entirely trustworthy? And I was kind of, no, obviously to an extent they're not, because they're trying to do the whole get him away from Eve and go with Dawn thing, but it was more like I was getting more of the vibe of like the Incredibles 2 and that kind of thing. So I wouldn't have put it past them to go there, but like at least they didn't do that. But then it would have been something that was at least set up much earlier than the monkeys are. So the monkeys just feel like this pretty much tacked on thing that just say, we needed some sort of action-packed climax, so this is what you're going to get. Monkeys. So, yeah. So, there's really not much else to say. It's just a pretty pointless movie that's a case of, it gives you that false hope of, that with all the effort they put into getting this out, and how desperate they seemed to be to get it out, it was not for really artistic purposes or to show off any new ideas they had or any new creature designs they might have had. No, it's strictly a money thing, I think, which still is a very weird choice. If this was made strictly to make money, why they have done this release the way that they have. So, I don't know. So, that's pretty much it for this one. We're almost to the end of this sort of one review at a time thing, and we're getting closer to stuff like Mac, which is probably, there's, what, 3 more Fargos, and a few more of these, and then we'll kind of be in that, we'll officially be in the December area from where we kind of got behind, or I got behind, or whatever. So, until all that other stuff, I think that's it.